pivoting fast to meet these new challenges head-on. With Drone Delivery Canada by your side, businesses, institutions, and communities can now optimize their supply chains, no matter what obstacles they may face. Reimagining the way you deliver.
Hey everybody, welcome back to your Dawn of Autonomy podcast. I'm Don Zolda, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. We are rounding out and concluding an incredible month that we have dedicated to this theme of complex ops, sponsored by UAvionics. And today we have with us the pleasure of having Steve Magirias from Drone Delivery Canada on the show, because when you think about complex operations, these folks have been doing it for a while in North America, and we're really excited to talk to you about that today, Steve. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you. Appreciate you taking the time to include me in your show.
Of course. And by the way, big shout out to Volatus Aerospace, of course. They're your new partner. We'll talk about that in a bit. But Volatus, this is their third year of endowing the Volatus Above and Beyond series on this podcast. And they've been with us almost from the very beginning, and we really appreciate them. So Steve is a Volatus Above and Beyond series guest today, and we're really, again, appreciative of Volatus for that. But Steve, let's talk about you first, because we're going to, of course, spend the whole time talking about your company and all the great things you're doing and that you have done. But let's kind of give that background of, where you're coming from in your professional career to explain kind of how you became the leader of Drone Delivery Canada.
Yeah, so, for myself, my background is in engineering. So I've always worked in different technology companies, whether it was the injection molding industry, medical devices. Probably the closest was working within the military aspect. So the company I work for actually developed the helicopter handling systems. So these would be manned helicopters at the time, but essentially the technology would help land the helicopters on the back of frigates for the navies.
Wow.
So that was the main product. So that was early, if you will, innovation. So a pilot would hover over the frigate, and then the technology would guide them to land it. Now you can imagine, it sounds simple, but when you're in different sea states, there's a lot of complexity involved. So we had the whole system that would essentially help the helicopter land and then traverse it into the hangar safely. That was my first kind of exposure to aerospace and defense, if you will. And then when this opportunity came about to join a company, to lead it, being a disruptive pioneer, especially within Canada, doing the research and then being the first Canadian company to have a CTA license, which is required in order to deliver cargo. It was just an opportunity that was too good to pass up.
Well, very, very cool. So tell us about Drone Delivery Canada, this company. We saw the cool video earlier, but tell us what DDC, Drone Delivery Canada, is all about.
So the name kind of gives it away. Drone delivery and focused in Canada. Started 10 years ago. 4 entrepreneurs founded the company, and essentially they wanted to be disruptive in terms of the drone space and how do they look to make a difference. And it started out mainly with remote communities, because Canada being such a vast country, if you look, 80-90% of the population lives along the Canada-US border, but there's still, a good chunk of the population that needs the ability to access stuff year round. And so when they started, they didn't want to build just a drone. So they looked at it from a full logistics solution, the infrastructure, the drone, the software, the whole logistics platform. Now, some would say we were well ahead of our time early on, given where the regulations are and where things needed to get to in order for this to come to fruition. But the company did a great job building the technology, the ecosystem, essentially to prepare it for scale going forward.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth, actually, when you said some would say, because I was actually going to say that. 2014 is when your founders got together and hatched this idea of DDC. And, the idea also that there would need to be an entire ecosystem, and that Deliveries is really a critical target market. Because when you think about it, Steve, you're right. It preceded most of the regulations. The early adopters were like using this for photography, basically, whether it was real estate, again, not to denigrate real estate photography. I mean, those can be also complex operations depending on what you're doing. But generally speaking, people were throwing a drone out to take like a 360 view around the house and things like that. How far we've come in these just handful of years, even though everybody thinks the industry is moving slowly. But the fact that you all were so far ahead in your thinking and were one of really the first ones to go out there and really start delivering, like you said, the remote locations. And so, you kind of alluded to it, but I really want to dig a little bit deeper into the origin story here because, what really was that inspiration? I mean, you got 4 guys sitting around the table and they decide, hey, let's create a drone delivery company. Can you kind of give us some insights into what was the thinking there as far back as 2014 before anyone else was really doing this?
Yeah, I mean, in talking to the founders in the past, when they came up with the idea, they would go to local people and saying, hey, what do you think? We're going to do a company. We're going to have technology that does X, Y, Z. The first comment they got is, we'd like to know what you guys are smoking up there, and we want some. Because they were really...
Oh, that's how the delivery idea came out. We got to do it now. I'm just kidding.
Well, it is legalized here now. So, but no, they really pushed the boundaries. And a lot of the reason they developed everything was because of necessity. Back then, you couldn't go, okay, I need a drone that's going to carry 10 pounds and go this far. So the necessity essentially caused them to develop everything, right? And really push them towards that technology perspective. And I think the more, the first 5 years, let's face it, it was a skunk works. They focused on developing. If you come to the back of our facility, you will see all the initial prototypes, one that looks like a donut, a fixed wing. So it's pretty neat. It's almost like a little museum of what was tried. So the first 5 years was really perfecting that. And I would say 2019 is when they really started going out and looking, okay, how do we get a proof of concept or a use case to actually show what our technology can do and what the potential is going forward.
And besides the actual drones and the hardware, as you said, there was an entire ecosystem, and that includes a remote operations center, because part of the vision, I think, early on was, hey, to do this right, we need to be able to do it from really far distances beyond visual line of sight, one pilot, potentially to many, many aircraft. So tell us what we're looking at here.
Yeah, so this is a picture of our remote operations center where we have a remote pilot for every operation that we've flown. And so the pilot in command basically controls everything from their desk. And we have done flights, as close as 20 minutes away where our main test site is, where we prove everything out, to essentially the middle of British Columbia. So, if you don't know Canadian geography well, think about being in New York and doing a flight in Los Angeles, for example, or Washington State.
Gotcha, yeah.
And so when we had a project there where we were delivering, back at the time, it was COVID test kits, pharmaceuticals, and essentially at the other end of the country, and we were doing a 5-kilometer flight that was remotely monitored from our headquarters. And of course, using the crawl, walk, run phase, today it's one pilot per flight. Over time, as the regulations and the technology improves, we obviously want one pilot, looking after multiple flights going forward.
Of course. Now that operations center is in Toronto. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And then, you've got operations going all over Canada right now. So that is amazing. All right. So let's talk a little bit about this interesting evolution over time. So you started out with the drone, the software, because obviously to fly beyond visual line of sight, you have to have software. You've got this remote operations center. Walk us through kind of the different parts and pieces of your ecosystem.
Sure. So it starts, we put in the ground infrastructure. So we have what we've trademarked as the drone spot. So I think there's a picture of that where, and it's built, and we have different versions, but the main one we use is built for a remote environment. So if you look at it, it's got the landing spot, it's kind of fenced off, but we also have a sea container that we convert into kind of a mobile office and storage area. So there's somewhere for any pilots on the ground to be in where the drone can be stored. Battery charging stations, which are monitored by the software to let you know which batteries to be charged, and which sequence to use them. So the whole goal is really for the infrastructure to be as simple as possible. The goal is that any material handler, if you will, that knows nothing about drones, walks into the drone spot, loads the drone, puts the batteries in, closes up the drone, and walks away and has nothing else to do. So usually there's a drone spot in each, depending where we're delivering. Then there's the drone itself, which we design and assemble here in Toronto. And then the piece that pulls it all together is the software. So the software will not only monitor weather, it'll do bills of lading, kind of the full logistics piece, but then it's also used to monitor all the flights from origin to destination and then back, depending how that looks like. That was our initial kind of look at it. Okay, we want to fly from here to here and do runs back and forth. We've also expanded it to do more of a network operation. So you could have a central hub and then have kind of a spoke system where you could have multiple drone spots to be able to deliver. Now, currently today, you can land at the drone spot, or we can do a drop spot, which is a little more simplified, where we'll drop the package into a cargo net or with a parachute from a delivery perspective.
Oh, wow. Okay. So all of the software that you're talking about, is that proprietary? In other words, your team created this?
Yes. So everything we've done, we've kind of developed, again, back to necessity early on.
Right.
You couldn't go grab software off the shelf to do this. So we developed it all on our own. Now, going forward, we also look to partner because you realize it's also very costly and expensive to keep doing everything on your own. So we've adjusted as the years have gone by as well.
Okay. Wow. All right. Very good. So plug and play that you can, adjust it over time. And we have a picture of one of your drones. You've got how many different models right now that you're using?
So this is the Canary, which is our latest under 25 kilogram or 55-pound drone. It's the successor of the Sparrow. So the Sparrow was the first one we put into commercial operations, and it was the workhorse. We learned a ton from it. But with the Canary, we made enhancements. So one of the features, you won't notice it, but actually with the engineers, a remarkable job that they did to reduce costs and make it more user-friendly. In the drone spot, we used to actually build a scale into the ground of the drone spot, because what would happen is the software would weigh the entire system, and if it was above the limitations, it wouldn't let the drone fly.
So it would weigh like whatever also package it had attached or in it. It looked like there was because it's like a little egg. There's like a pod, if you will, and is that where?
Yeah, so in the old system, we built the scale into the ground. So it's costly as well. In this one, the scale is built inside the drone. So we know what the drone weighs. We just have to make sure the package is below, the 10 pound limit. So the scale is actually built into the drone, which is pretty neat and innovative. And we've also added a parachute to the drone, right, as a safeguard. So for flight over people. So we are certified to fly over people within Canada because of the parachute.
Well, you must also have, let's just say I have a kind of a surface level familiarization with the Canadian drone regulations. And so is it an SFOC, a special flight operations certificate, to do kind of more complex operations like the one you mentioned, maybe going that 5 kilometers from a remote op center. So I assume you have an SFOC in addition to permission to fly over people?
Yes, no. So typically, depending on what airspace we're flying in, we have approval to fly, kind of as is. But if it's complex or different areas, then we definitely need an SFOC. I mean, a good example of that is we have a hospital to hospital route that we're currently flying with the Canary. So we're delivering blood samples or, test kits, whatever they need to transport between the hospitals, because in some cases, the main hospital will have all the testing facilities, and it won't be at all the other hospitals. So they'll use the drone to fly it to the main site, do the tests, and then get the results. So with that one, we've achieved partial BV loss. So we don't need visual observers throughout the whole 10-kilometer route. And we're currently working with a ground-based radar system that we implemented at one of our partners. And we're getting close to being full BV loss on that route, where we won't need any observers at all.
Wow, that's amazing. And you are delivering things. This is one example, the hospital route you're mentioning here, but you're doing things globally. My understanding is over 2,000 deliveries every single day just in 2022. So can you elaborate a little bit about, what you've done and what you've been able to accomplish with this whole ecosystem that you've created for drone delivery?
Yeah, our focus really, the two main areas. One has been healthcare, which I mentioned. So this is kind of phase 2, linking the two hospitals. The first phase actually delivered medical isotopes. So from our partner DSV in Milton, we actually flew the longest commercial route we've ever flown. It was 13.5 kilometers to a local hospital. So it was an interesting process because we had to get, dangerous goods approval. We got audited by the Canadian Nuclear Safety Association, had to have procedures in place if anything went wrong. So really a lot of great effort by the team to put that in place.
Right.
And now that we have the hospital to hospital, within the region that we're in here in Ontario, there's 3 or 4 hospitals that we're looking to link them up in the future, right? So we have all these legs that we've set up. And then long term, we want to have a whole network linking all the hospitals together with various spots. And also trying to use as much of the infrastructure that already exists. So at one of the hospitals, they have a helidrome that we're using that instead of spending money to put in our own drone spot infrastructure, right? So the team's getting innovative in terms of how they approach it. So we've seen a lot of good pickup in the healthcare space. And
can I ask you a question about that, Steve? Like very specifically, because I think sometimes people don't fully appreciate the value add that drones bring to, for example, healthcare like this. I covered Mission Go like last year as an example. God rest their souls. But they had done the first delivery of a human organ, and working with them on a white paper and understanding what the traditional manner of transporting those organs and how many sadly fail or become not viable along the way. When, for example, on ground transportation, they get stuck in traffic, and this is life and death for people, right? They're on a list waiting forever. And when you finally get one and then somehow something logistically along the way doesn't work out, that's just that's like literally tragic. So these isotopes as an example, and some of the other things you're bringing, what is the value add then for Drone Delivery Canada, in terms of healthcare? What does healthcare receive that is so much better than how they would normally deal with these kind of materials or medicines or equipment?
I think the initial value is the speed. In terms of the delivery. So if you look at when we were delivering the medical isotopes, that 13.5 kilometer route took us about 15 minutes to fly.
Okay.
Right. To drive it with clear traffic, which if you know the area up here, clear traffic probably happens at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
It was easily 20 to 25 minutes. And so with traffic, you're looking 30, 40 minutes. So if you can have a continuous route delivering as required, and it doesn't always have to be medical isotopes, it could be whatever you can put in the drone to deliver. I think the initial benefit is that speed and ease of use, because you have it already set up. And then over time, as you get to BV loss and scale, then the financial aspect also starts to improve, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't really want to gloss over this, because this is Complex Ops Month that we're closing out here. the fact that the Nuclear Regulatory Agency in Canada had to review your operations before they let you fly those isotopes, that is significant. The hazardous materials approval that you received for that particular use case, again, very significant, and I think very rarely done. So, hats off to you guys for doing that. So healthcare is one big and growing, let's just call it, market for drone delivery, as you have personally experienced and are in the midst of still experiencing. What is kind of that other big sector that you wanted to talk about?
So we've had an operation at Edmonton International Airport now for a few years. We're wrapping up phase one, which was a proof of concept. Okay, can we fly, from the airport location to an offsite location? So a ton of work went into that with the team, working with Transport Canada and also NAV Canada at the airports. We were fortunate enough for that project to win the AUVSI Innovation Award at the 2022 conference. Yeah, which we were kind of shocked, but when you look at all the work that went into it, and just if you look at the flight path and working with everyone, like, okay, here you can only go 50 feet. Okay, here you can go up to 150, and you got to drop.
Oh gosh, yeah, just the airspace in and around an airport, which is why generally speaking, drones are not approved to be there. There's a reason for that, right? So absolutely.
Exactly. And Edmonton Airport, very innovative airport, fantastic partners. They always want to be at the cusp of technology. So they've been a great partner. We proved out phase one, worked really well. We still fly it today, but now we're in the process of expanding that. So again, similar to the hospital model, how do we expand this airport model to do more from the airport? So phase two, which we're currently working on getting approvals for, again, working with the same partners, which we expect to go faster now that they know what we're all about. We're actually going to deliver from the same airport spot to a First Nations medical facility off the airport. So again, expanding that ecosystem.
Well, and combining the two use cases. The airport one with the healthcare one for the Indigenous people in Canada. That's amazing. So
we don't like to do things the easy way, because this flight path is actually going to cross one of the runway approaches. So,
oh my gosh.
So when you look at it, I mean, there's some work involved, but the team here, usually you're hardest on yourself, right? So you're like, it's taking too much time, but the amount of effort and planning and execution that goes into it, once it's running day to day, everyone's like, oh, look, there goes another flight. But the amount of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into getting that operational, it's really a great testament to the team at DDC.
So this Edmonton Airport, operation you have, is this middle mile logistics? Because you're using essentially the airport almost like some kind of a warehouse / hub launching point for whatever use case, whether it's healthcare and this, the future one with the Indigenous folks you're talking about, or other things. Is that a good characterization of what you're doing from this airport?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I would say it's middle mile, could be final mile as well, though it's a fixed drone spot at the facility. So really, I would classify it more as middle mile, because then they'll distribute from there. Yeah. Obviously, at some point, we'd like to take it right to the end user, depending what that looks like for them. But for now, it's the old crawl, walk, run phase, right? So how do we get that next step forward?
Well, that's so exciting. So in that progress along the way, like where are you in terms of, are you already doing these deliveries, or do you have kind of a target like, hey, by September of this year we're gonna have our first one, or what is that looking like? Yeah,
our goal right now, so there's some permitting we have to do for putting the second drone spot by the First Nation medical facility. So we're in that process of going through all the permitting, getting everything approved. And our goal right now is to be flying in August timeframe. So we have a pretty robust process whereby once we get the route approved, then we do X number of flights that have to be flawless. So no issues whatsoever. We usually do 25 out and back, and we want that to be flawless before we make it operational, right? Work out any bugs, any issues that we have before we flip that switch.
Well, and again, getting back to this idea of complex ops, you mentioned permitting, and most people don't also appreciate that on the lands that indigenous people, have, there's usually a tribal law and government that will govern that. So I assume that permitting is going through, what nation are you working with? What group of
So
people?
this is the Montana First Nations in Alberta, and they're also, they're a fantastic partner because they just see this. I had a conversation with their CEO, and we can touch on this, when we get to the merger discussion. But
Yeah.
they see a wealth of opportunity. Like delivery is one small piece, and their CEO and president was like, okay, how do we do this? How do we do that? How do we do it? And I'm like, and at the time when he first told me, I'm like, well, I have a solution, but it wasn't public yet.
Yeah.
They have a goal to also train indigenous people to become pilots. They have all this work, whether it's wind farms and solar panel inspection, and they're just brimming with ideas. So delivery is just that one small piece.
Yeah.
I think there's a ton there that we can do together with them to grow it, especially now with our new partner.
Oh, that's awesome. We had Indigenous Aero from Canada on the show before. I know there's some affiliation with Volatus because I feel like Danielle introduced me to them. They're doing great things, training folks. And, we had James Grimsley from the Choctaw Nation. You probably have heard of James, in Oklahoma. And, I've worked with James a lot over the years. And in fact, he was on our PBS special on drones and eVTOLs. And, as one thing I learned that I didn't really appreciate is the horrendous infrastructure oftentimes on indigenous people's reservations, especially the roadworks. They're awful and dangerous. And sadly, people die every year just trying to get to the store or get that medicine that you're talking about. So, as use cases go, the healthcare one in general is awesome. But to combine that then with the indigenous peoples and kind of helping them in remote areas, hard to reach areas, I think is really awesome. So I love what you're doing there. But you mentioned your merger with Volatus. So it's a great segue, I think, to talk a little bit about this. I've been watching Volatus for years now. I met Glenn. Glenn Lynch was one of the first people, honestly, I met in my company. And I've just been watching what I call the Volatusphere grow over the years. And so tell me about this partnership and what you believe will come to pass from it.
Well, I mean, I've always watched, Volatus from afar in terms of what they were doing. Obviously, they're a Canadian company, so you typically, okay, what are other folks doing? Is there an opportunity to collaborate? And, as time went on, I kind of looked at it and I thought, okay, I think there's going to be consolidation in the drone industry. Capital's getting a little harder. There's more strength in numbers. So when I looked at it at a 50,000 foot level, I see DDC as a company that's focused on technology. So lots of IP, lots of tech, not as much revenue. Obviously, you could argue we're in the hardest vertical when it comes to delivery, and it's not quite ready to scale yet. So,
Right.
Okay, lots of tech, not as much revenue. Then you look at Volatus, they don't have as much tech, but a lot of revenue. And they have this revenue generating machine, if you will. So how do you commercialize all this IP? Well, if you've got a revenue generating machine, if you put the two together, should be the perfect marriage.
Yeah.
And so as I thought that, I reached out to Glenn through a mutual friend, and one thing led to another. And, the first discussion was about an hour and a half, and off it went. We kept churning through ideas, and, one thing led to another. And here's where we are today.
Well, that's awesome. And I don't know if you're willing to share here, some of the plans that you have. You're obviously doing a ton of work throughout Canada. You have aspirations also across North America, in the U.S. Market as well.
Yes. Well, so for us, we focused within Canada,
Right.
just the reach we had. And we also figured, look, if we can fly in the extreme weather within Canada, it should be a lot easier to fly in some other parts of the world. Because when we tell people we fly in minus 30 Celsius weather, they kind of, or minus 20, they look at us and like, our drones don't go below like 0 Celsius, right?
And
So
there are drones. I'm not going to mention which one, but here in Colorado, where I am, there was an air show, and a group brought their drone out. They could not get it off the ground because of the elevation.
oh, really?
It wasn't even like weather. It was simply like, oh yeah, because they build, I guess, at sea level or whatever. I don't want to reveal who this company is, but they were shocked. They were like, wow, we didn't see this problem coming. And so yeah, I mean, to be able to fly in all kinds of different areas, environments, weather, that is key. And you've been kind of doing that as essentially using Canada as your, for lack of a better term, proving ground. It's not even a testing ground; it's a proving ground.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
And everyone thinks, well, you're only doing cold weather flying, but I mean, we get in the summer, we'll get some crazy hot, humid. So we get the two extremes, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
more cold.
Y'all had a big wildfire problem last summer,
well,
if I recall correctly.
exactly.
So yeah, that kind of lends itself to that as well.
So by leveraging that commercial strength, it'll help us expand globally and look at opportunities outside of Canada. But then also it's not one-sided, because there's also our remote operations center, I think, is a crown jewel that we can leverage for all of the operations, not just delivery, whether it comes to wildfires, the inspection work that Volatus does, even some of the manned aviation that eventually we plan on converting to unmanned aviation. So it really become a revenue generating hub for the combined company. And when you come see it, it's actually an impressive part of our facility, probably the most impressive part. So it shows well, but it's also very functional and can really help propel revenue going forward.
Well, and you created it, you've been using it successfully. It obviously is the future, because I was in the United States Air Force, and all of our drones were at the time remotely piloted from an ops center, like what you showed us. And that is what is going to have to happen to really scale this industry, like you said, across all the different use cases, not just for drone delivery. And by the way, this show is about connections, Steve, and I'm going to introduce you to Mark Ganung. He is head of the Nevada test site in the US, and his comment to you was, congratulations on your success to date. And he plans to conduct flight testing in the US. So, if you want to talk to Mark, I'm happy to connect you. I know you and I were talking before the show that you all had a presence at Commercial UAV in Las Vegas a couple years ago. And I ran into your booth there. Mark, actually, I was talking to him last year, and that's when he told me he had moved over to the test site. So I know they're doing great things there. So if you want the intro, I'm happy to make it. But Mark, thank you. Mark is a super fan. He's like on every show in our chat saying hello. And so we appreciate Mark and everything he's doing. So, all right. So great merger, lots of benefits down the pike. But, one other benefit, of course, as you said, you have got hardware, but so does Volatus. They've, and they created their own airy port, which is so right now am I saying it right? The Sparrow, that's the little guy. That's your little one.
The Canary, the Canary.
The Sparrow was the first one. Canary was, sorry, I'm getting confused. Yeah. The Canary is launched from one of these ports. Is the idea to integrate the Canary into an airy port to have really super remote and autonomous or automated operations going forward?
Well, you'd probably need a bigger airy port, the clamshell design.
Yeah.
But you can already see, so we've taken an airy port that Volatus has, and we've put it at our test site, which is about 20 minutes away. So you can already start to see the benefits of the merger. I'll give you an example. We had a customer come, I won't say who the customer was, and originally we came for delivery. So they wanted intra-site delivery of small parts because they pay a courier and they pay a fortune, and it doesn't really make sense.
Right.
So they came in, we gave them the tour, the presentation, then we took them up to our test site 20 minutes away. So and we said, we're going to show you the Canary. So it does its route that we have, and drops a package, lands, etc. They said, well, I'll just show you this Airport, which is the new technology, Volatus, et cetera, et cetera. So just right off the bat said, wow, we could really use that, because what we have in our lots, we have a big security problem. So if we could have this thing kind of flying and monitoring, it'd be awesome. So we're sitting there saying, not only do we have a solution for you
to deliver those parts,
right,
but we can use it for perimeter security.
Exactly. So you start to see the benefits of the merged company and where the commercial opportunities are. And that's really where the focus is. How do we grow those revenue opportunities as a combined entity, and also leveraging the resources?
Well, and not only that, but as you said, through your ops center, you could integrate those feeds, and one person could be watching the security camera or information or data coming from that drone in the airport, as well as, and if I recall correctly, Volatus has drone dogs, they've got crawlers, they got you could have an entire system going through your remote operations center using, now what they use, your software, which I think is called Flyte, Flyte.
That's right. Well, it's one of the things we'd have to look at. I mean, they have some software, we have software as well, and it's trying to figure out what's the best way going forward. Flyte right now is based as a logistics solution, but that doesn't mean we couldn't look at adding to it or adjusting it as required. Wow,
that is awesome. I'm so excited to watch this continue to thrive and grow. So you mentioned the Edmonton Airport project will literally get off the ground like this August. That's the target. Just in the, for the rest of 2024, what do you have coming up, Steve, that we can look forward to watching and seeing? And also, where might we actually find or meet you and your team if we're not going all the way up to Canada?
So in terms of us, we'll definitely, we're at the big shows. We're at AUVSI. We'll be at Commercial UAV, most likely probably in the same booth as Volatus.
Okay, very good. Makes sense. Yep.
To find us there. And so we'll have definitely have representation there. A lot of our focus now over the next few months is kind of closing off the deal. But we're working daily looking at, okay, how do we leverage the synergies? What does the structure look like going forward? And more importantly, what are the key priorities that we want to work on to be laser focused to make this entity succeed going forward? There's strengths on both sides, and we want to amplify those going forward by making sure we've got the right processes and the right priorities. And there may be some instances where there's some projects that we need to pivot. But from what I'm seeing early on with, just using the Airport as an example and introducing that to our customers, I think there's going to be a big pickup for us going forward. And then for us, the next phase is if we're looking at higher payload drones, what does that look like? I know we've had some projects that we've started and stopped in the past, but there's discussion going on at looking at what's that next step or what's that next level. So I think as a combined entity, we have the technical know-how, but I think bringing that commercial piece from Volatus and understanding what the market really needs will really help us develop something that will really propel us forward.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. As I think about Volatus and the shows I've been at, that they've been at, you can kind of start reading the tea leaves, and the public safety sector is a big one, obviously, for them. Oil and gas, or the energy sector, kind of enterprise solutions, as you said, inspections writ large, and things like this. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what you guys hatch up together and how this moves forward. So we definitely have a lot to look forward to. And by the way, Steve, whether it's you or your teammate coming to Vegas, mark your calendars now. Come fly on Labor Day, that Monday. Always have our big party that evening. We call it the Flash Mob networking event. It'll be our 4th annual. So You'll get to meet a lot of great people there, and just stay tuned for where and when, but it is absolutely happening. So it should be a great time. All right. So we are getting close to our time. We are, about 5 minutes out, and I want to make sure that we covered everything, that I didn't miss anything, Steve, that we covered really what you wanted to talk about. You have so much going on, so much ahead of you. I'd like to kind of cede the floor to you to kind of wrap us up with some concluding remarks, and certainly let folks know how they can reach you to learn more about what you're doing or to get involved.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Overall, we've spent a lot of time developing technology. We were looking for that next step. How do we scale and commercialize? We see this merger as the perfect marriage in terms of going forward to really leverage our technology and Volatus's commercial strength going forward. There's great opportunities. There's a strong combined team that's going to be put together. So really excited on that, really focused on hitting the ground running with that. I mean, Glenn and I speak daily, if not multiple times a day, in terms of the priorities. There's a lot of work to be done to get it over the finish line. And even then, once we get it over the finish line, then that's when the real work starts. And that's the exciting part of seeing what we can build together. So we're all super excited about that. If anyone wants to learn more about us, they can go to our website, dronedeliverycanada.com. You'll see the various technologies, some of the people on the team in terms of what we're working on, and keep an eye out for more exciting press releases between us and Volatus going forward.
All right. And fun fact, I might be able to see you in Canada, possibly, because I'm going to be doing the keynote at Aerial Evolution Canada in November. And I'm already talking to that group, about getting out to Ottawa for that. I think it's November 5 to 8. So I know Canada's ginormous, and right now I think actually my flight's locked and loaded just to kind of be there for that event. But I'm super excited to actually hang out in Canada for a little bit. I've done a couple pass-throughs in the airport going to international flights, but I've never actually been. So I'm really excited to get to experience Canada a little bit.
Yeah,
and I hope I could see you there.
Yeah, no, for sure. 100% will definitely be there. And Ottawa's, the nation's capital. It's a great, great city. I think you'll have a great time. And the people, we are obviously a much smaller industry in Canada. So when you see, the Canadian show is probably 1/10 the size of an AUVSI, but fantastic people. Glenn and I sit on the board of the AEAC, and just some great people, a great show. It's smaller, but it's almost like a big family, et cetera, in terms of people connecting every year. So I think you'll really enjoy yourself, and we look forward to seeing you.
Well, awesome. Small but mighty, to be sure. And, again, everybody, thank you so much. Thank you, Mark, for being out there, and everybody else. We're closing out this great month dedicated to complex ops, again, with our Volatus Above and Beyond series guest, Steve wait a minute, I'm going to screw up your name now. Magirias from Drone Delivery Canada. And we're transitioning soon here to a brand new month of July dedicated to global leaders. We'll have a different Volatus guest at the end of July. But for everybody out there, our clubhouse is normally the first Thursday of the month here in the US. That's our Independence Day. So we are going to be doing Clubhouse tomorrow instead, to preview you're going to hear about and see in July, Global Leaders Month. So hope you can join us 1 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. And we kick off next month with Viasat, our month sponsor for global leadership. So thank you so much, Steve. It was great to chat with you today and learn all about everything you've been doing with DDC. And we really look forward to hearing more, seeing more as we go forward, and certainly seeing you and your team in person. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much. We are out here.